everybody, Rose Buddies. Welcome to D&D Community. We are a monthly tea party talk show where I get to drink tea with my friends Celeste and Hannah, and we chit-chat about Dungeons & Dragons. I am Lisa Penrose, Good Witch on Twitch, and the brand manager for Dungeon Masters Guild. We'll go over here to Celeste.
Hey everybody, my name is Celeste Conowich. I am a D&D designer, most notably one of the authors for Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden. I am also a podcaster. I run the Venture Maidens Actual Play podcast and a streamer and all kinds of stuff, and I'm excited to be here. Hey everybody.
Celeste does one or two things.
One or two or seven. But it's Friday, so we've forgotten.
And Hannah.
Oh boy, it's been a long week. I am Hannah Rose. I do D&D and RPG editing, writing, game design, and occasional streaming and drinking tea with these wonderful people.
Okay, I don't want to wait any longer to taste this tea. I've been smelling it all morning, both in the bag and brewing in my press.
It smells so good. Okay, here we go.
We're trying, it's caramel apple black tea from Friday Tea, one of our sponsors. And it smells exactly like the name, like delicious candy.
Oh, I just got a hydrate notification on your channel. What does it mean?
Oh, that means we all have to drink tea.
Oh, well,
no!
Lisa, I love your mug.
Oh, thank you. It's a little cauldron.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So what is in the caramel apple tea? Does someone have the baggie on them?
Give Celeste the baggie.
Hang on. I'll go get the bag.
No, I can read it off.
Oh,
actually, I think
Celeste doesn't run.
Chat. Okay.
Caroline the Geek is our lovely community mod, so thank you for doing the mod thing and letting folks know that Friday is an awesome family-owned tea shop here in the Seattle area. Their blends are amazing, and Friday works so hard to work with like small farmers and really source her ingredients consciously, which is lovely. And we have a coupon code or a discount code. It's Community Love. And on any orders $20 or more, you get 15% off.
I did want to shout out somebody in the chat is saying nice tiara. This was made by Green Merdragon on Twitter. She makes and takes commissions for amazing dice tiaras. So please, if you are ever feeling down, I highly recommend buying.
It's dice.
It's
I didn't
dice.
even realize. Can you bring it closer? Oh, yeah. I was just thinking it was beautiful.
That's
beautiful
amazing.
Stones. That's gorgeous.
So I highly recommend getting yourself one, because if you're literally ever sad, wearing a dice crown just makes your life better. So Green Merdragon, check it out. Kelly, who makes them, is just incredible. I got the bag.
Yay! Read it off.
Look at these chunks.
Big apple
chunks.
And you can definitely taste it. So this, the ingredients: black tea, apple, natural caramel, and apple flavoring. And that's it. So we're really on theme here. It's a direct, very apple taste. I really like that it smells really sweet, but it doesn't taste sweet, which is something I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, it tastes somewhat sweet to me, but I usually don't drink teas with caramel or chocolate or any of that. So I've put some milk in it, and that's really mellowed it out. Ooh, actually, the more I drink it, the more I like it.
This would be so good with milk.
If I made an actual fancy latte, it would be very good.
I agree that it definitely has a sweetness to it for me, but not as sweet as it smells. Which, but I also feel like with a little bit of sugar and milk, this would be like a dessert tea.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's really nice. Oh man, fall, y'all, it's almost here. Aren't you excited? I have all of my sweaters. I took them out of their boxes and I hung them all up, and I'm just looking at them every day, waiting.
It's 80 degrees here.
I know, but waiting for it to not be so hot. I can't wait.
And speaking of this delicious tea, we've started a giveaway in chat. The code is #FallSips. And you can enter to win a delicious sampler of 3 Friday afternoon teas, including this blend and some others that you can request, or blender's choice. Oh, those samples.
Oh
so
my
good.
gosh.
I want to sample all the teas.
Is it the sample of everything from the poll? Or
it could be. Usually we do the tea that we're featuring. So in this case, the caramel apple black tea. And then if somebody has requests or preferences, they can let our wonderful Mon know what they win.
Yeah, that was the hardest poll of my life, trying to pick between 4 fall-themed teas to try it.
I got some of the maple hojicha for a friend, and I'm definitely going to try it.
Ooh. Oh, Undead Ooze is asking, is the giveaway open to Canadian folks?
I think right now international shipping is a little difficult and expensive.
A cluster.
A little expensive. But Friday does ship from the online store, and you can use that giveaway code. So thank you for your patience and understanding.
The maple hojicha, I voted for that one in the poll.
Me too.
And I can't wait to try that one. I also got like a little packet for myself. But I feel like you could get all fall samples if you win the giveaway, and then do like a tea crawl. Just taste all the teas back to back. He's so caffeinated.
There were even more that I didn't put at the poll. There's a ton of seasonal selections. There's a page with all the seasonal selections. Maybe somebody could put that in chat. But there's the maple hojicha. There's the harvest spice, which I believe is like not your typical harvest spice. It has a ton of like a really rich, full-bodied flavor. There's Rebecca's orange spice, which I really want to try. That sounds like a great holiday tea.
I love anything orange spice.
Yeah.
Oh, Caroline just posted
Thank you,
FridayTea.com collection seasonal selections. Go buy everything.
Yes.
Yes. Well,
and we've reviewed a bunch of the teas here on Community. Not all these fall ones, but
yeah.
But should we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh my gosh, I guess so.
I guess. I mean, I could have just a show where we just talk about teas, specifically Friday's teas.
Seriously.
And just list them all and how much we want to try all of them.
I mean, I think at some point we need to have Friday on to educate us on teas.
Oh yeah,
true.
Master tea class.
I mean, or you could just take her tea class. She does have tea classes. Okay.
So our theme today is dungeon crawls. So folks in chat, let us know how you feel about dungeon crawls. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you feel in between? And why? But what about Celeste and Hannah? How do you feel about dungeon crawls?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like dungeon crawls. I have always enjoyed just sometimes a good like crunchy dungeon is just what you need. But it is definitely dependent on who I'm playing with. I feel like, because I think there are just some people who just do not like dungeons, and they have such a bad time in them. So if you have a group that's like on board and like ready to get into it, that can be one of the most fun D&D experiences for me personally.
Yeah, I also love a good dungeon crawl. I like exploration a lot in D&D, and I like combat too. And for me, I was thinking about this the last couple of days in advance of our discussion, and I enjoy dungeon crawls the most when they tie into the plot of the campaign, of the story, or when they have a plot of their own. I think a lot of really good dungeons out there have factions. That's traditional, actually, in some old modules, and have different factions, and that allows the player characters to develop a story of their own based on which factions they ally with or fight with or betray or whatever. Yeah, but I really like it. I think there's some, if it ends up being a slog, because you're just going through room after room after room and, checking for traps every 10 feet, that's not really my thing. But the the rise and fall of tension in a well-managed dungeon crawl is really fun.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that folks are saying in chat. Like Undead Ooze says variety is good. So yes to dungeon crawls as long as it's not all you get all the
Yes.
time. And Fluffy.
Go ahead.
Oh, and Fluffy Snowfall says that they're fun as one shots, especially, but I also enjoy them as part of an interlude to break up campaigns, which is kind of what you were saying, Hannah. I like them as part of a larger story, so you can kind of have like, if you've been doing a lot of social interactions, you can get like crunchy traps and fighting.
I think you have a reason. I don't love them as one shots because it never feels like I really have a strong enough reason to be there and to be exploring the dungeon. And maybe someday I'll be proven wrong about that. I have a great dungeon crawl one shot. Though there's also pressure with a one shot to finish in a certain time, and dungeon crawls always take longer than you think. But yeah, I like having a reason to be there to explore. And if you're playing with a group that isn't just motivated by treasure and glory, then being able to investigate things that are relevant to your group.
I wonder though, should we take a step back and define what dungeon crawl is? Does it have to literally take place in a dungeon also?
I guess that
or is it more of like a style of play? I don't know.
I guess when I do think of a dungeon crawl, I do think of going through like a confined space,
especially
like
an underground
one. Like a closed space, and that doesn't necessarily have to be like a actual like a structure, or it could be in the Underdark, a series of caverns, or it could be like a forest that you're going through, and it's just like this enchanted forest, and you have to like fight your way out or whatever it is. So I think a dungeon crawl for me is through a defined series of rooms that is closed off from the rest of the world, and it's something you have to get through, and you're not interacting with like outside atmospheric forces.
And I think the way part of what comes into that, certainly you could design an outdoor encounter like a dungeon crawl, and that could be an interesting experiment, but there are usually, unless you're gonna like stone shape your way through a wall, there are usually defined paths to take in a dungeon, and there might be probably a good dungeon. There are several different options of ways to go, but it's not a sandbox because you're not just wandering around. You have to take a path through.
Yeah, I feel like that confined, limited space is a really important part of a dungeon crawl. There's definitely like wilderness crawls or like hex crawls. Although Key Squared in chat says hedge maze. That could be an outdoor dungeon crawl for sure.
I like that. I want to see that.
Ghost Owl Studios says in quotes, so I don't know if they're writing this from another source, but a dungeon crawl is a type of scenario in fantasy role-playing games in which heroes navigate a labyrinthine environment, a dungeon, battling various monsters and looting any treasure they may find.
A literal definition. Let us know where you pulled that from, Ghost Owl, because I think most of that would be good, but I feel like looting any treasure they might find, I think that is sort of like changed. I really do think the definition of a dungeon crawl has evolved as D&D has evolved, because it definitely used to be about like, hey, we're gonna go here to make some money and slay some monsters, and that's totally what dungeons were written for.
Although somebody brought up recently on Twitter, I want to say it was Sean Merwin, but I have to go check. Somebody brought up recently on Twitter how a lot of some old school dungeon crawls and dungeons had this assumption that you would use this table that you're supposed to use for running dungeons, where you roll I think a d20 when the players enter any room, and based on the result of that, the creatures in the room are either hostile and attack immediately, or suspicious and wary, or completely neutral or friendly. So it wasn't necessarily just a hack and slash, even though I think that culturally it became interpreted that way. Yes, thank you, Ghost Owl Studios. I was wondering about if that was Wikipedia.
Yeah, for sure. He did bring that up, and I was like, wow, that's so not the experience I ever had in an AD&D dungeon or even 3.5 dungeons. It definitely, there was a period of time where it's like so much treasure was crammed into every room, and like, even the fact that in design they had every single monster listed what the treasure was on them, right? The implication being that, if you defeat the monster, you have to defeat the monster and you can get all of this treasure.
Mm-hmm. I'm just really distracted by the amazing dungeon ideas in chat.
Okay, let's share some
So,
of these.
okay,
Yes,
so
yes.
Fluffy Snowfall says a hedge maze dungeon crawl as part of a masquerade ball murder mystery.
What?
Would be such a fun adventure.
Write it, please.
Yes, I like that.
The Willy Boo says, shrink the party down, explore the inside of a teapot to read the leaves for an important portent.
Oh my gosh.
But then as your party navigates the teapot, do they change the configuration of the leaves? Is that like a metaphor for forging your own fate?
Oh my gosh, it's too early for metaphors.
No existential questions. I'm
no
sorry.
Existential questions, Hannah. You know the rules. Oh, wow. Hedge maze full of ghosts of lovers reenacting their secret meetings for eternity. Irate pixies and sprites tending to the flowers. Animated topiary monsters.
Hedge monsters.
Hedge monsters. Okay. This chat is the best.
Good.
Y'all are coming up with some really great ideas.
Heck yeah. So do you all have any like favorite dungeon experiences to share? Like is there ever been a dungeon or like a room or an encounter in a dungeon that just really stands out to you as something incredible?
Let's see. I don't think I have personally played. Well, actually, no. Actually, as I'm thinking about it and expanding them not having to just be in dungeons, I guess I have played more dungeon crawls than I'm aware of. I really like dungeon crawls where there's like different paths you can go and it's all sort of like a giant puzzle. Like you have to go through different branches to like unlock things or whatever to get into the big room.
Yeah.
Which also like Tomb of Annihilation has a few things like that.
Aren't you playing through some of Dungeon of the Mad Mage?
Yeah, I just started playing a game of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. We've made it to the 2nd level. So it's lots of goblins and terrible gelatinous cubes, Celeste, and the like. But I'm really excited to get further into the dungeon where levels start to get a little bit more complex. And all of these levels do tend to have like you mentioned, Hannah, like different factions of creatures. And so getting to know the interaction of the different peoples and monsters on the levels is really interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead, Celeste.
Doug in Texas in the chat says, I remember that many dungeons were often referred to as monster hotels in the past because of the random nature of what you would encounter in a dungeon. So, that's amazing. Let's call them that now.
Doug in Texas. One of the first sessions I ran was a one-shot for my college D&D group at our alumni reunion, and I made an actual monster hotel that was run by a lich. It was a little hard to decide. I feel like it didn't end up being a great dungeon layout, so that was a difficulty. But the idea was really fun, and they got like halfway through it, and they were like, "Wait a second."
Yeah.
There's a fantasy elevator in here. There are all these monsters just hanging out, drinking wine.
What's going on? Very cool. I feel like I haven't gotten to play in a lot of dungeons, but I've run a lot of dungeons and I've made a lot of dungeons. And I designing a good dungeon is like one of my favorite things to do. I feel like there are so many ways to go about it, depending on what you want to accomplish, with the story and what it is that your party is looking for. Like one of my favorite dungeons I ever did was for Venture Maidens. It was sort of like a trial that they had to go through. So they were basically like booped into this confined dungeon space. And then for each of the challenges, I had basically like kind of of 6 areas of the dungeon, and they were all themed around one of the different stat scores. So, you know, going through like strength, dex, constitution, and like setting up these rooms and these challenges based around those different skills was a ton of fun, because they, you know, once they caught on to what was happening, it just became like like, how do we use, you know, our speed? How do we use our wits? How do we use our wisdom to solve this challenge? So that became a lot of fun.
I've noticed in both your dungeon descriptions that you mentioned, or I guess if we're counting Hannah's Monster Hotel as a dungeon, which I think it is,
dungeon to talk about.
But I noticed between those that there was something where there's some overarching theme that the characters, the players get to discover, and that is part of the fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, those are, you know, the most intriguing. It's sort of like a campaign, right? Like, how do you pitch a campaign? Really, dungeons are like, you know, they do include a lot of things, because like good dungeons have the social elements, the exploration, and the combat. So they are like micro campaigns every time. So you have to have that theme, or, you know, that narrative, because like just, you know, getting to the last room, like, that's not exciting. But if, you know, there's the big boss you're going to confront in the last room, and you're traveling to do that, or, you know, the powerful artifact that will save the kingdom in the last room, that's exciting. And, you know, working up to what that is can be so much fun. Especially, I love mysteries in dungeons, and like finding clues.
Again, related to plot.
Yeah.
Or creating the dungeon's own plot, a reason to be there, a reason to explore.
Oh, yeah.
What was your dungeon, Hannah?
Oh, yeah. So my current campaign, the GM remixed Sunless Citadel, which is a fantastic classic dungeon, and remixed it to put in our setting, like basically on this island right underneath where our characters live and study. And so we had some reasons to go down there, and we were pretty low level. So we explored kind of the first level and went down to the second level, but there's definitely still more down there. And it was remixed in a way where, being familiar with Sunless Citadel, like, I could tell. We ended up meeting Meepo and thankfully befriending him.
Yeah, that's the right way to do that dungeon.
We got him a job. Taking care of cave carrion crawlers, because that's what he was doing. And he was in disgrace because some of them escaped or got stolen. Anyway, so that was I really enjoyed that it was remixed to have elements of our campaign and the plot of the overarching campaign and things that our characters needed to discover. And it was actually one of the first arcs of the campaign. And since we were playing over Discord, I really enjoyed having this dungeon map. Essentially, we got the overall like map layer by layer, and then I took notes on it on my computer. And that was a great aspect of exploration, where I didn't have to like map the dungeon room by room and quarter by quarter myself, but I could take notes on it and share it with the party of what we found in each room. So that was a fun way to be engaged while playing online and experience with exploration, but also get some combat and traps and social interaction.
If we're including dungeons where we were the dungeon master, I ran all of Tomb of Annihilation for an awesome group of guys in over the course of like over a year. I think we played, because they were completionists. They're the perfect group to run through a dungeon, because they want to hit every single room. They want to figure out every puzzle, get as much loot as possible, and experience. But the great thing about Tomb of Annihilation was, like, each level had some sort of theme that they had to discover. It was clear. I like when it's clear what the big bad's room is going to be, so you can kind of feel prepared for it. Oh, yeah. Sometimes because they had to find pieces of a puzzle to unlock that room. And every room had some sort of trap or puzzle, but not in like a just roll in investigation check to overcome like a pit. But it might be like there's a combat in the room, but there's some sort of trick to this combat. Like the monsters only move when you move, or the monsters immune to this particular type of damage, or something like that.
Monsters are hiding behind a bunch of pillars, and you have to sneak around to get them from behind or break the pillars. Yeah.
Everything had some sort of interesting twist to it, which made for a really fun dungeon to want to finish every single room.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I mean, really, designing a good dungeon is such an experiment in, like, you know, looking at monster ecology, looking at, you know, creating interesting battle maps and tactics, and, you know, really playing with environmental hazards. These are the places like where dungeons shine, because, you know, you do have monsters that are living in this dungeon, right? So they're not going to be just, you know, doing nothing when the party shows up. Like, of course they're gonna have, you know, put in traps or have some kind of, you know,
or they're employed there and working for the boss of the dungeon.
And you know, it's their job to guard the treasure. So you can, you know, the best dungeons just shine when they do think about those things, when they do think about the day-to-day lives of the monsters or the inhabitants, or, you know, the purpose of the dungeon.
I do think at some point there's some suspension of disbelief, unless you want to go really silly with that kind of thing, because then, you know, you might have rooms where the creatures of the dungeon eat or sleep or whatever, but if you start getting like, you know, bathroom rooms and closets and cleaning supplies and like all of that, it can be fun if you want to be funny, but also I feel like there's a little there's an element of realism that can mess with the layout of a kind of smooth and design for players to explore.
Yeah. I will say though, in designing, I won't go into it too much because Celeste is playing Dungeon of the Mad Mage with me, but in designing some of those levels, we were handed like levels with hundreds of rooms in them. So you bet your bottom dollar I put a bathroom in there to fill up one of those rooms. Yeah. But I like to, I don't love just like completely random things. I do think it's important to have rooms that are just like empty, so it's not every single room has a combat or something that you have to overcome. But there might be some sort of overarching, like not the main plot, but one particular creature in the dungeon might have like little clues to his personal story throughout the dungeon, and maybe there's like one goblin who gets picked on by all the other goblins and he's hiding in the bathroom.
Meepo.
Stuff like that. Or Meepo.
Yeah, actually,
we love Meepo.
That kind of brings up a good point that I'm curious about. For designing dungeons, like how you go into that process, because I have a personal process, and then I have professional experiences that I've had about designing big dungeons. So I'm curious to think or to get your feedback on, like, when you're sitting down to, you know, make a dungeon, what has that experience looked like for you? What do you start with?
Are you asking me in particular, or both of us?
Yeah,
okay, both
group,
of us. Okay.
Group, yeah.
I guess for me in particular, in most cases, I like to try to first think about, well, what's the overarching theme I want for the dungeon? What are like the main like rooms or types of challenges that I want them to face throughout the dungeon, and then go from there. But my experience with Dungeon of the Mad Mage was being handed a map and needing to fill the map, which was also interesting in a different way, and something I might try again, because it kind of flips how you think about design.
Yeah, I was going to share. I had a very similar experience for Rime of the Frost Maiden. You know, I won't tell you where, but there is a dungeon in that book, and that I got to design for. And yeah, I got this beautiful map just full of empty rooms, and it was like, fill it. And I was like, whoa! It was a wild experience to like look at the map first and go ahead and kind of fill it in a way that made sense. So. But also thinking about it, like that's how I have designed dungeons in the past too. You know, I'll sit down and first thing I do is like graph paper, because I think about, okay, how long is this going to be is usually what I am. I'm like, is this going to be like a 2-session dungeon? Is this going to be a whole like story arc dungeon or a one shot? And then I'll build sort of the number of rooms I think will accommodate that. And I have something really nasty looking on graph paper, and then I fill in the numbers and I start putting stuff in the dungeon, like puzzle pieces. So I guess that actually mimics my professional experience, kind of mimics everywhere. Just put mimics in everything. It sort of mimics how I have designed dungeons in the past, which was, you know, sort of interesting to experience.
Well, last time I designed a dungeon, it was a one-shot, just 5-room dungeon. And I came up with the concept, thought about, like, why this exists as a dungeon, you know, who was the person who created this space, or in this case, adapted this space for their use. I'd say spoiler, but the adventure's not out yet, but I could say that the, like, person who was using the dungeon, who set it up, is actually dead, and you have to fight something else. But then I went through, as the players would go through, room by room, to think about, okay, how will the players approach this and experience this, and like Lisa said, get the theme and the feel that you want.
Ooh, somebody in chat mentioned traps, which is definitely something really important to talk about with dungeon crawls. So Fluffy Snowfall asks, what are people's thoughts on traps in a dungeon crawl? Do you like to go heavy-handed, or does that make your party approach each room inch by inch to avoid them all? That's a great topic to bring up with dungeon crawls, because I really do feel like there's a delicate balance to be maintained with traps. So what are your thoughts on traps?
Depends on the party, both the characters, but mostly the players and what they want. If you have a party that really wants to do, you know, that Tomb of Horror inch by inch exploration and enjoys that tension, you know, being paranoid in character, then that can be really fun. I do think I mentioned earlier how a good dungeon crawl has some rise and fall of tension. So I actually really like Apricot's and Lemon Dot's response of a few big traps to keep them on edge early, but after that, not terribly heavy. And I think that's good, where you get like the traps of, okay, this is a dungeon, like this stuff is real, this place is a bit deadly or very deadly. But then as you explore the dungeon and get a little bit into the plot and story or factions, or treasure or monsters, then those themes rise up, so that you're not, you know, you're not necessarily checking inch by inch on the way to the boss room. Although, you know, good old spinning blade trap things that you can see coming up is a different kind of trap. Yeah. Maybe more of an environmental hazard, but hidden traps, I like the idea of having a few, but making them more early in the dungeon.
I feel the same, especially about traps like pit traps, darts coming out of the wall, those sorts of things where the consequence is you take some damage and then you carry on. I feel like that can get kind of tedious. So putting, I mean, even like a lot of those just at the beginning of the dungeon, just so folks know you have to be cautious, and it adds that sort of suspicion to everything. After that, having some interesting traps where there's a consequence they have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Maybe it changes something even in another room and they just hear mechanisms moving and they don't know what it changed. Or that's sort of like Indiana Jones, like a giant ball now rolling through the corridor and it creates like a chase scene that they have to deal with. Things like that are interesting later on.
I think one of my favorite traps, I guess it's not even really a trap, I mean, you can make it a trap, is putting like a mysterious arch in a dungeon, or like making a doorway really fancy, and then, you know, just watching the party like try and decide what to do with this, like, you know, stepping through it, throwing things through it, like, you know, giving those things that's like, wow, this looks really out of place. So it, you know, so your players create the drama for themselves, you know, even if it really is just step through the gate and you're transported somewhere else. It's, you know, it allows them to be as excited, as scared as they want to be, which I think is something you're kind of looking for in a dungeon experience, right? So if everybody's apathetic about it, cool, it doesn't really matter. And then and you can just not do that.
Especially if you have a rogue or character that likes to investigate and check for traps in your party, that giving them a chance to shine, whether that's in seeing that the trap is there and investigating a way to disable it or get past it, or kind of a puzzle solve it, or in checking for traps to protect their party members. But Fluffy Snowfall has an idea I really want to talk about, because I love this idea, which is both highlighting foreshadowing danger and some story elements. They said, my favorite application of traps in a dungeon crawl is to introduce broken traps at the beginning of the dungeon, so people know they're a thing. Like a fireball trap that just puffs out a ball of warm air because the magic is spent after centuries.
Cool.
I think that builds tension really well, and also kind of lets the players know that the danger is there, especially if you have players who haven't done a dungeon crawl before. Lets them know that that's there without just like possibly killing them.
I've been thinking a lot about, because playing through Mad Mage has gotten me thinking a lot about how I, as a designer, can fix some of the tedium that comes up with dungeon crawls. And I've been thinking a lot about passive scores, so passive perception and passive investigation, and like really trying to design with those things in mind. So because if you have a rogue with a passive investigation of 18, they should not have to check a room to see if there's a trap. They should be like, oh wow, look at that tile on the floor, this room is trapped. So I've been trying to do better about like letting these people know immediately when they step into the room with their passive score, have them on hand on a note card, and be like, okay, you noticed that this chest, oh, that lock is a little bit weird, or like, oh, the door, there's something over it. And trying to do that enough so that when I don't say something, that's when they get suspicious. So it's like that's the moment where you're like, oh, I have to roll the check for traps, instead of like, oh, okay, I'll do it, and then the one time you forget, oh no.
Yeah, we had that experience a little bit, although it was good in this sense for tension, where we were like, okay, this is a small room, one of our characters just went in without checking because the rogue was off looking at a door on the other side of the corridor, and then we went in, and a carrion crawler fell on top of us in this tiny room.
That's always the way it happens, and I always feel so bad. Like the one time you don't do it is always where you put the big nasty trap.
But it was good in and out of character for that tension.
Yeah,
to have happen once.
Yeah. So, what would you say? Do you think? Would you say that dungeon crawls are best suited for particular pillars of play? Or do you think they can be representative of all pillars of play? And for those who don't know what the pillars are, we typically talk about combat, exploration, and social interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the best dungeons do incorporate all of those things. I love having at least one or two important NPCs in every dungeon. I feel like, breaking that up and having somebody to talk to and trust or not trust is so good, and also really helpful, because it can be hard when it's just your players and you as the DM don't have an NPC to help guide action or answer questions. And these things can be anything in a dungeon. It can be like a talking skull that it's sitting outside the dungeon, and it's like, hey, take me with you, like, and through the whole thing there's lots of things you can do. I mean, the dungeon themselves could talk to you. There could be talking paintings along, hung inside the dungeon, but having some kind of resource that the players can go to and interact with on a social level, I think really, really helps
resources beyond the player's own spells and abilities. That's a nice balance. But yeah, I agree. I think having all three pillars and emphasizing or weighting them at different points in the dungeon, if you're doing a lot of multi-session dungeon, or based on what the players and characters are interested in or excel at.
Yeah. I will say, if you're using kobolds or goblins, as your NPCs, make sure you have several, because, I can just hear people already telling me like, oh, I had a helpful kobold, in the first room and they incinerated him. I'm sure there are more.
Don't incinerate Meepo.
But that's a good lesson to learn too. Like, if you go walk into dungeons gun blazing, maybe that's not always the best solution. I think, dungeons at their best are an exercise in, who
Restraint.
Can we trust? Can we trust ourselves? How are we going to do this? What's going on?
How I've tried to combat that as a dungeon master has been to always make like my friendly goblins and kobolds really cute, always very scared of the adventurers and making a big show of that, and just generally being kind of like pitifully adorable.
Oh yeah.
But then I also do that for all monsters.
Yeah,
and my players who play with me a lot start to suspect anything cute.
Oh my gosh. It's so good. So good.
What are other, aside from like a guide NPC, what are other good opportunities for role play in a dungeon? And what about role play between parties, like, or in the party?
Yeah. Something I really like, it's sort of a dungeon trope, is having like memories or scenes or like ghosts throughout the dungeon. One of my favorite adventures came out in like a dragon magazine a billion years ago. It's called The Lady of the Mists, and it's was
Celeste, I knew you were a dinosaur.
I know. I'm a lich, kind of lich. But I'm cute. I really have the best of both worlds. But yeah, it's an adventure called Into the Mists, and it was like sort of a Ravenloft adjacent adventure. And
I was gonna say, I like it already.
Yeah. The whole thing is, you go to this castle, right? And there's this like rumored like ghost who haunts the castle. And as you climb through the levels of this ruined place, you see all of these scenes that kind of tell the story of what happened here, the tragedy that happened. And the players get pulled into these scenes, and it's always about interacting with it, and what you do sort of influences what you learn. More or less as you're going through the dungeon. So I find that's a really great trope that I love to play with if you're in a dungeon that works there. Because like, why not? If there was a lot of psychic pain or trauma or even joy that happened in a place, that is so magical, why not have those like kind of stains or remnants for the characters to find?
I absolutely love that. It also makes me think of creatures like red caps, who are kind of summoned into existence by like rage or like horrible things happening, rage and fear. So just having a dungeon full of creatures that were kind of summoned by these emotions even would be kind of a cool alternative to that.
Ooh.
Yeah, I got to design, it's not out yet, but in the new Kobold Press bestiary that's coming out, I designed a creature that was basically that. It kind of feeds off of misery. So what it does, it sets itself up in these like horrible dungeons where, so many adventurers die and get wounded, and so it is drawn to these places to feed on that misery, and pushes luck and things, so traps go poorly, and so it just all goes a little bit harder. So there's so many opportunities, especially there's so many cool monsters that I think could create social interactions in dungeons.
Yeah, Lisa, you mentioned resources earlier, and thinking about my experiences with dungeons I've enjoyed and that idea, I think it can be great to have resources or allies that the players can utilize, but maybe at a cost. So if you have a creature who's too powerful for the characters to fight, or maybe they would be able to take it down, but they don't want to, use up all of their spells and abilities and health before the boss, then you could have a creature who will maybe help them out for a price or a favor, or give them a side quest, but they have to. There are decision points. I think having decisions and having players be able to make meaningful decisions in dungeons is like socially plot meaningful, resource meaningful decisions in dungeons beyond just their own abilities. I think that's hard as a designer, but it is really great.
Mm-hmm. So we're actually nearing Q&A time. So do you mind if I quickly plug a couple Dungeon Masters Guild titles?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first one I want to plug I'll put the cover on the screen right now, is called Table for Two. So if you're listening to us talking about dungeon crawls and you're like, no one will play a virtual game with me right now, or you can't play a virtual game for some reason, but you have a family member or a roommate or a kid with you who you can rope into some D&D, these are one Dungeon Master, one player adventures, and it includes a dungeon crawl type adventure by I think he's actually in the chat. Paul Keeter wrote an adventure called Missing in the Underdark. What I really like about this adventure in particular is it really leans on the exploration side, or absorbing the atmosphere of a dungeon. So there's lots of random tables where there are different little encounters that don't necessarily add a combat, but kind of add to the flavor of this really mysterious, suspenseful dungeon. Even like things that make you feel uneasy, what happens and what is the effect of that. So I like all the little D6 tables in it. So if you want just like you want to get in on that dungeon crawl action, and you've got two people, yourself included, Table for Two. There's also a bunch of other adventures. I think there's 9 total.
Yeah, I see a ton of dinosaurs on the front of that, and that's extremely on brand, so I think I have to go buy that immediately.
Okay. The other title I wanted to call out, so a big part of dungeon crawls traditionally have been loot and fighting like a big bad in their lair at the end. So I was like searching dungeon crawl titles and stumbled upon lair furnishings, thrones.
What?
Yeah, yes. So these are a bunch of really cool thrones that your big bad can sit on that have different effects. And I don't know if either of you have dice available to you.
I do, right here.
Who am I asking? If one of you wants to roll a d4 and one of you wants to roll a d20 and then add them.
Okay. You want me to roll a d4? Or no, I'm going to roll a d20 because I have one with Venture Maiden's logo on it that RPG Dice made, so... That's my little dice plug for today. Okay. I got a 6.
And Hannah, you're muted, by the way.
Whoops, thank you.
I got a 16 on my D20.
Okay.
I got a 3 on my D4.
Okay, so we're going to go to page 19, where there is Throne of Mischief. It's got like that Harlequin sort of panel on it. Ooh, it is tough to stare for long at this misshapen, oddly built fixture of bizarre craftsmanship. A throne of mischief is a prize only to those beings who find chaos and uncertainty a virtue. Even when unoccupied, these contorted frames seem to move and stretch. So let's see. Each of them have like AC and hit points, but then they have different effects that the person seated in it can do. So there's mimicry. A creature seated in a throne of mischief for more than 1 minute can mimic any humanoid voice it has heard. Cool. I can just imagine like a really annoing boss taking advantage of that.
Especially just repeating everything the player character
say. Exactly. They can also cast minor illusion at will, and can also cast one of the following first level spells. Let's go to the next page. So they can, there's a D6 table, and they can cast, yeah. Let's see what spell we can cast.
2.
We can cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
Oh, of course.
That's really tough. There's also something called Swap. A creature seated in the Throne of Mischief can use their reaction to target a creature they can see as it makes a melee or ranged weapon attack. They have to make a wisdom saving throw. And on a failure, choose a different target, and then they attack them instead. Ouch. Ooh, and then there's Hypnotize, where they can basically cast Hypnotic Pattern.
Nice. I can totally imagine player characters with a base, like a base or a castle of their own, defeating the boss and lugging the throne out of the dungeon, or maybe teleporting if they're high enough level, but just taking the throne out of the dungeon and setting it up in their own entrance hall.
Oh my gosh, I'm not going to read it all, but there's even more actions and regional effects of the throne. So this must be a pretty special throne. Yeah, this is really cool. I wonder if there's a throne in here where it would be fun to just put the throne in a room. And just see what happens when someone sits on it.
A sentient throne that talks to you when you sit on it.
Oh, yeah. So that's a really fun one for all of you creating dungeons for your players out there. Or pick it up for your dungeon master to do some mischief. Perhaps literally with the Throne of Mischief.
Mm-hmm. I'm all about talking objects in dungeons too. So
yes.
Perfect.
All right. So we still have about 10 minutes to do Q&A. So, the Q&A card. Look at these cute jelly cubes. They are little jelly sugar cubes.
I've drinking all of this tea.
I still have a little bit, but I will drink some more for both of us.
I have a backup mug of tea.
A backup mug.
I'm drinking Genmaicha, which is toasted rice, so I feel like it's also fall appropriate.
The rules of the Q&A, put question really big in all caps, the top of your question, and no existential questions. Unless you're Hannah, I guess. Hannah is above the rules.
No, I did one. Gosh, accidentally. It wasn't even a question.
One accidental existential question.
That's the quota, though. Thank you all for the hydrates and the posture checks. That's
looks like we're drawing a giveaway winner soon. So if you haven't entered, you can
hashtag fall sips.
Thank you.
Oh man, something we didn't really talk about real quick is puzzles. In dungeons, I love me a good puzzle.
I think that needs to be a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Ooh, that'd be a great one.
I do have something coming in the future. Hannah's also working on it that might be relevant to this. But
wait, which thing is this? Oh, that thing. Yes, I'm excited about that. Well, maybe we can talk about puzzles when that comes out.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Yeah, I love one of my favorite weird experiments I ever did as a DM was it was a puzzle dungeon. Like I had 3 friends who they all loved puzzles, and it was just room after room of puzzles, and that was so much fun to do. So
I love puzzles too. Puzzles and murder mysteries, which really are just a big puzzle.
Which is a big puzzle.
Okay, Key Squared asks, question, what is a creature you have never used when designing or encountered when playing in a dungeon but would like to, either as a boss monster, / lair designer, or as a minor encounter? Oh.
Have I ever thought of a holder in a... okay, yeah, technically Xanathar. We didn't, defeat him, we just survived him.
That's a really good question.
Fought a dragon within a dungeon? I mean, it's kind of like someone said earlier, it doesn't necessarily make sense when a huge-sized creature is in a dungeon that has 5-foot corridors, so the top floors. But
dragons can turn into all kinds of things.
Yeah, they can totally warp. So I don't think I've ever fought a dragon in a dungeon. That might be nice to cover those bases.
I'm just looking on D&D Beyond for monsters above CR 20 and seeing what we're looking at here. What about you, Lisa? Do you have anything?
I'm trying to think too, and I feel like I've encountered so many creatures.
Technically, I haven't encountered a gelatinous cube, and I would like to, but I watched friends of mine encounter a gelatinous cube, so...
Oh, have I encountered a gelatinous cube?
I have, but I just don't remember it.
Something I would really like to do, I've always wanted to put together, a really good aquatic-themed dungeon with, a kraken fight somewhere in there.
Ooh, that's big. Maybe you come out of the enclosed area of the dungeon straight into the Kraken's lair.
Yeah, it's the dungeon is all about getting there to summon the Kraken, and it comes out of the abyss in the bottom, or but also what's cool about because when you're thinking about scale, if you are doing underwater an underwater cavern dungeon, why not have it so that, you know, it's these huge vast caverns you're traveling through, and in the final room maybe it is like a crack into the center of the earth, you know, that the kraken like comes out of in that final room. So like an elemental themed dungeon, I think, is something I would really like to do.
Yeah, I
That'd
would
be
love a
really cool.
dungeon that, I mean, so many dungeons are created by wizards with too much time on their hands.
Yeah.
So one with like just a huge beast would be really cool.
Yeah.
Miss K. Rose asks, question, what was your favorite loot to find in a dungeon? I've always wanted to find something sentient.
Ooh.
Oh yeah,
I
like
don't think I've
sword or
ever had
something.
a sentient. I don't. No, okay, I did have a sword that was kind of sentient at one point, but not like talked to me fully. I would like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, something I found in a 3-5 dungeon I was running. This is when we my party, they found like a little vial that had like a just a smidge of the essence of Nerul, the god of death. And basically when they opened up this vial, because in 3-5 they had things called templates you could add onto your characters. So for this, once they opened the vial, basically my character became undead. So they were an undead and got a bunch of advantages and stuff for being that, and disadvantages too. But it was a cool like character option, you know, that they found, you know, hidden in this dungeon. So something that like, you know, can really influence your character, or like a boon, or, you know, finding like a limited wish or something. I love things like that, which are like these like gifts that you get to, you know, use, or an opportunity to learn something new or a new skill, are usually my favorite kind of treasures.
The
Ooh.
friendship of Meepo.
You know, the memories you made along the way, those sort of
Oh yeah, yeah. That,
oh
of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
I really like this one by Apricots and Lemon Dots. Question, what's your most memorable mishap in a dungeon? Um, I don't want to spoil. I'll be relatively vague because I know Celeste
Okay.
wants to play Tomb of Annihilation, but I got to play a little bit of the beginning of the tomb. As part of like the stream, which was pretty cool. It was like multiple groups that he was running through the stream, and so you'd like pass someone's like Lehman's tiny hut and have see a bunch of traps that they'd set off and stuff. But our party was two Yuan-ti, and I forget what his original race was, a not Yuan-ti. And we had like adopted him as like, we're gonna go through this whole ceremony and like change you into a Yuan-ti pureblood as well. And he'd like finally kind of accepted his fate as like one of these Yuan-ti. And then we did this fight, and there was a creature where if it like hits you once, like basically disintegrates you. And he just died like that. It was like minutes in game after he'd fully embraced his Yuan-ti Lizard King. Like, yeah. It was
Wow.
so heartbreaking. We were
I
like, what just happened?
Yeah. I guess I had something similar happen. I was running a group through White Plume Mountain, which again, so it's one of the you know, you can find it in the Yawning Portal, and there's this one room where you have to. There are these big discs that are hanging, and it's a very misty room. So you know, it's sort of hard. You have to jump from these platforms, and down below there's this boiling lake of horribleness. And like I had a party, you know, they were all pretty good with their dexterity. It was all fine. And it was like in a series of all of them jumping. It was like one. And then I was like, oh my God. And I gave them rolls to try and save themselves, like as a secondary. And it was like 2, 3, 4. I was like,
Goodbye.
and like
Did they just TPK?
yeah, within a span of seconds, they TPK'd, like trying to jump over these discs. And I was just like, this is so
And it wasn't
weird.
even like you set the DC too high. They just rolled.
No,
all
it was like
terribly.
a 14 DC, like not hard, and they were like, you know, higher level. So it was so, and I was like, this is how we died. Like, you know, they had fought like vampires and horrible monsters through this whole thing, and some slippery discs were like the
discs!
end of
The
it was,
ultimate foe.
yeah, we were laughing so hard because it was so like, it was so wild. So that was probably the funniest like trap, like weird mishap moment I've ever had.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was rough.
I can think of a few different ones. Oh man, some good dungeon times. Including one where a fellow player accidentally got decapitated by a trap called the Dummy's Beard Trimmer.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh
Yes,
no.
that was in the playtest version of the original draft of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And I'm very sad it got cut out because I just love that trap name. But the latest dungeon I play a winged tiefling who can fly. And when we got to kind of the entrance of the main dungeon complex, once we'd gone underground a ways, because I was flying down this really steep kind of open staircase, and I said, I land in front of this door, which, like, land in this courtyard, this makes sense. My tiefling has like 9 strength. I'm not gonna fly for hours. And I said I land in the middle of the courtyard, and my DM was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Well, I said I would."
Oh no!
And I set off a pit trap.
No.
Oh, no. Right in the middle of of course.
Yeah, and of course I could fly. I didn't have to set that off.
Oh my goodness gracious. Folks have so many good questions, but we are coming up at, it is now the end of the hour. So let's go backwards and do some outros. Congrats, by the way, to the Willy Boo on winning the tea giveaway. So we'll start with Hannah.
Okay, I am Hannah Rose. You can find me on the internet at Wild Rose Mage. I talk about a lot of D&D things on Twitter and post some dice pictures and a lot of cat pictures on Instagram. Celeste.
Yeah, hi, I'm Celeste Conowitch. You can find everything I do, including all of the things I am writing, all of the shows I am streaming, all of the podcasts I am doing at my website, celesteconowitch.com. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at cconowitch as I give news and updates and stuff. For those of you hanging out, if you want a first look at Rime of the Frost Maiden on Monday, I'm going to be doing a kind of a sneak peek walkthrough with Roll20. So you can catch me there Monday on Roll20 app. And we're going to spend a couple hours looking at all the fun stuff in the book. So DMs out there, if you want a little heads up, if you want some previews, there will be some spoilers. So, if you're into that, I would love to see Monday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. So that's me.
Yay! And I am Lisa Penrose, your good witch on Twitch, as well as the brand manager for Dungeon Masters Guild. I stream right here on twitch.tv/Lisa Penrose at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Mondays, I do story time if you want some gentle reading. Tuesdays, you can learn to read tarot cards with me for Tarot Tuesday, also at 5 p.m. And Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Pacific time, I do Druidcraft. So if you want to watch a gentle craft stream, join me. Also, next week, Tuesday at 7 p.m. on twitch.tv/VV Spaceship, I'm going to be playing a superhero grandma. Superhero grandma.
Ovachan Panic!
Yeah, Ovachan Panic. Super fun on the Big Dungeon Show. Hope to see you there. And thank you, everybody, for joining our tea party.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.